Good evening, everyone. Certainly, there are a number of social issues that have come to the fore in recent years. Most of us are familiar with issues of choice as they relate to women, the LGBT community, religious freedom, and race or ethnicity. One social and political movement you may not be as familiar with will be the focus of this discussion. The Right to Die movement, or pro-euthanasia movement as it is defined by opponents, is an attempt to expand end-of-life choices primarily for the terminally ill. Now, certainly, we will all pass at some point. How we do is usually not up to us. For those of us who may face a prolonged death due to terminal illness, a number of organizations have sprung up to assist in hastening this process. They consider themselves part of a new civil rights struggle trying to expand individual autonomy. With the rise of these organizations, there has also been an expansion in the purpose of organizations that traditionally opposed issues such as abortion to also encompass concerns relating to what they consider euthanasia. For my talk, I will focus on the rationale behind the movement and how the process can be varied across the country, history of this movement, including major achievements for proponents and opponents, current social and legislative action, and possibilities for the future. Let's first look at what may cause someone to decide to take the path of looking for an assisted death. Certainly, electing to take one's life is not something that most people contemplate on a day-to-day basis. But for some who are significantly ill, death appears to be a release from the pain and possibly the lack of dignity that may accompany a loss of faculties. This short clip from a documentary, The Suicide Plan, a PBS Frontline episode, illustrates why some choose to go down this path.
I'm not afraid of dying. I've always believed that death is nothing to fear. It's part of living. Everybody has to do it. And I want to make sure that my death is going to be my way.
If Joan Foley Butterstein lived in Oregon or Washington, an open conversation with a doctor could allow her to end her life the way she's always lived it, on her own terms. By age 18, Joan had set out on her own. She was a singer and a dancer at the Latin Quarter in New York City. She married Tom Foley, her high school sweetheart, and began her life as a Marine wife. 9 years later, their daughter Kathleen was born. Life was good. But then, after 54 years of marriage, Tom got sick.
My husband died of lung cancer, and he went through chemo and radiation, and then more chemo, and then more radiation, and he was sick and miserable frequently, if not most of that time. But because I saw how he suffered, I made up my mind, when it was my turn, I was going to make sure that I don't go that way.
In 2006, Joan got remarried to Art Butterstein, an 86-year-old widower. Then, 2 years later, she found out that she too had lung cancer.
I told him immediately, I said I have no intention of going through all the chemo. Not at my age, and not with what I know is already wrong with my body. It's not going to make me have a lovely old life.
Joan's experience is largely representative of those who decide to take this path. She lives in a state that does not recognize the legality of assisted suicide and therefore had to find an organization. In her case, Compassion and Choices. They would assist her through the process of committing suicide in a fashion that would be certainly lethal but also painless. Now, for the small minority of people who do live in states that deliver right-to-die services, this process is significantly different. In Joan's case, she had to skirt the boundaries of the law. If anyone were to directly help her in performing the act of suicide, that individual or group could be brought up on criminal charges and possibly given a lengthy prison sentence. In the few states that do not view this act as criminal, doctors are able to prescribe medications the patients can take. it is a very narrow group of people who are eligible for such services, the prerequisite being that you are in fact terminally ill. Now that there is hopefully a bit of better understanding concerning why people choose this path, let's talk about how this movement began. In the 1970s, Jerry Comfrey, a resident of California, helped his wife, who was ill with breast cancer, end her life. It was this experience that spurred him on to found what was called the Hemlock Society in 1980. It was the first Right to Die group in the United States. His organization pressed for legislative change and assisted those with a terminal illness who elect to take their own life before their ailment would. Now, the 80s were largely absent of advancements for this movement. It was not until the early 90s that the profile of these organizations was raised due to media interest and a spate of doctors-assisted deaths that resulted in criminal charges being brought against the practitioners. The most notable of these, some of you may be familiar with, is Dr. Jack Kevorkian, who was also known under the moniker of Dr. Death. Dr. Kevorkian was successfully acquitted of charges in many instances and was not found guilty until he took the extraordinary step of ending the life of a man who was too ill to perform the necessary procedures to bring about his own demise. Dr. Kevorkian's experience has been emblematic of those who assist in suicide. The law as far as suicide is concerned in many states is vague when it comes to assistance. This has led to many who are charged with aiding in the act of being acquitted in court. With a heightened profile throughout the 90s, lawmakers in some states decided to take decisive action to restrict assisted suicide. Michigan made it illegal in 1993. In the mid-90s, Oregon elected to legalize doctor-assisted suicide. They were the first state to do so. It was not without opposition. Religious groups, a disability advocate organization, and the Oregon Medical Association all tried to repeal the law. But it was a popular ballot measure that has never been overturned. As we work our way up to the new millennium, advocates for assisted suicide have been more failure than success. With the Attorney General attempting to end Oregon's Right to Die law, several individuals being tried for the most part unsuccessfully for helping to end another's life through assisted suicide. Maine would reject assisted suicide as noted by National Right to Life Committee, but this was not the whole picture. In 2008, Washington State legalized doctor-assisted suicide. In addition, the practice has been made legal in Montana. Recently, as May this year, doctor-assisted suicide was made legal in Vermont, as a CBS article titled, "Vermont Governor Signs Assisted Suicide Bill," states that it is now the fourth state to legalize assisted suicide, and although the Vermont Department of Health needs to work out how this program will be structured, soon citizens who are terminally ill that would like to end their lives will have a venue to do so without legal implications. Although both sides of the Right to Die debate have had some success going ahead, it looks like a rocky road for either side. I'm going to outline some initiatives that are coming up in the near future. Currently, there is legal action in Minnesota against a radical Right to Die group called the Final Exit Network. That, unlike many proponents of assisted suicide, they do not just focus on the terminally ill, but any individual who feels as though their life is not worth living, that could possibly stymie efforts not only for those who would wish to take their lives because they feel they're unfit to live, but also for those who are terminally ill, as alluded to in their spring newsletter, by potentially limiting free speech. Now, barring the case going to a higher court and the changes that may bring, organizations like Compassionate Choices on the pro-assisted suicide side and groups like the National Right to Life Committee on the other side of the debate are continuing efforts. The NRLC mentioned before, rather than trying to organize efforts to direct change, the law relies primarily on public opposition and efforts towards legalizing assisted suicide. They provide various information to those who are interested in the status of legislation and court proceedings regarding Right to Die issues. They are, of course, not only group interested on the side of the issue, It is also true of some religious institutions that taking one's life is a serious sin. These groups rarely support in opposition to see legislation or initiatives stopped. On the pro side, Compassion and Choices is currently working through the court system in New Mexico and California to either strengthen palliative care or curtail laws against assisted suicide. They are also pursuing an extensive state-by-state campaign through regional chapters to exchange the status of assisted suicide. What changes may come of these efforts, it is too soon to say. It goes without mentioning that this is a very complex issue that can inspire a range of sentiments. Certainly on both sides, what will come of these efforts, it's hard to say. Many social movements grow in fits and starts, and some movements that look like they will be inevitably successful falter and die. Regardless of how you may feel about this issue, it's important to understand preeminent social issues of our time, if for nothing else, just to be informed about what is happening in the world around you. I hope you found this enlightening, and if you would like more information on any of these issues, you can visit the websites mentioned within the speech. I will wish you all a good evening, and thank you very much for your time.